Hi, welcome to the Israel First television program with myself, Martin Blackham, with my wife, Nathalie Blackham. Great to have you with us across the world. We really appreciate you. With a program that looks at news, we have features from Israel and an understanding from the Hebraic roots, and also an understanding about the times that we're living in from the Bible. So we'll get straight into the news. The main news story that's happened is the election of Naftali Bennett as Prime Minister. And the news says Naftali Bennett becomes Israel's 13th Prime Minister. That's a surprising fact in itself. I thought there was more, but he's the 13th Prime Minister on Sunday. The Israeli parliament voted in favor of a new coalition government, ending former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's record-breaking 12 years consecutive tenure as premier. The new government came to power with the support of 60 members of parliament of Knesset, whilst 59 opposed it. So only by one vote. Absolutely astounding.
I know, but usually this is the very first time, because usually you need to have 61, because they have 120 Knesset member, so you need to have the majority, so it's like 61. But this time it was only 60, which is the very first time that the Knesset passed only with 60.
The new Prime Minister's party, incredibly, only holds 6 seats. So Naftali Bennett's party has 6 seats in the parliament out of, I believe it's 120, which is, I don't know what the percentage is, but that's an unbelievable statistic in itself. And the fragile patchwork of parties making up the coalition could collapse at any second if any of the members decide to leave. At the moment when Bennett started his speech introducing his government, the religious Zionist party head Bezalel Smotrich and other MKs shouted shame while waving posters of victims of terrorism. They were removed from the plenum. Bennett began his inaugural speech as the new Prime Minister by praising outgoing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for his hard work over the years for the state of Israel and his wife Sarah for her dedication. He went on to say that the government would prevent the nuclearization of Iran and would not permit rocket fire on Israeli citizens from Gaza. Israel will not allow Iran to arm itself with nuclear weapons, said Bennett. Israel will not be a party to the agreement and will continue, because there's this Iran agreement which they want to push through from America and other nations, and will continue to preserve full freedom of action. In other words, they can take action against any attack or any military movements by Iran. Bennett vowed that the new government would work to mend the rift in the nation after 2 years of political deadlock. Remember, there's been a lot of elections. I think that was the fourth election we've had recently, and so they and we've had coalition kind of governments, and we've had no governments. So this is the first time that we've had a government for a while. And you might say, well, how do things keep running? Well, there's been other governments which have kept the ball rolling, as it were, in Israel. So that was the big news in Israel, the change of Prime Minister. Prime Minister, by the way, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is still at the Prime Minister's residence in Jerusalem. And indeed, he welcomed some guests. He had Pastor John Hagee and also former United Nations representative Nikki Haley was welcomed at the former Prime Minister's residence, which is still the Prime Minister's residence, so a bit confusing. He's meant to be leaving within about a month, roughly. But there has actually been someone trying to take out a High Court injunction to have him removed, but it's very strange. But there is a changeover, obviously, and Naftali Bennett's taken over at the Prime Minister's offices, and indeed is welcoming new staff. Now, at the same time, we also have an issue with terror. That's still something that is happening here in Israel. There was a terror attack at the entrance to Jerusalem on Wednesday, just yesterday. An Israeli soldier was wounded. Palestinian terrorists carried out a ramming attack Wednesday morning at the Hizma checkpoint at the northern entrance to Jerusalem on Road 60, causing injuries to an IDF soldier. The assailant then tried to stab other soldiers and was neutralized.
And she was a lady. She was a young lady.
Yeah, the terrorists come, they are not always male, they are female as well. A soldier was wounded in his limbs in a ramming attack next to Hizma. The emergency response group Rescuers Without Borders said Wednesday the soldier received medical attention at the scene. The incident occurred amid increasing frequent attacks against Israel by Palestinian terrorists. On Saturday, a Palestinian terrorist ran at Israeli guards manning a checkpoint brandishing a knife and ignored multiple calls to halt police, to stop, police said at the time. The terrorist was also neutralized. The day before that, a Palestinian terrorist was killed during clashes with Israeli forces in northern Judea and Samaria. So we are, there are still terror attacks happening in Israel as we speak. So Natalie,
and
I know
there is balloon. There is also a lot of balloons now was sent.
Terrorist balloons.
Yeah, terrorist balloon from Gaza. And 2 days ago, there was about 25 fires started because of the balloons, the terrorist balloon. So this is also a big concern. And not only that, we saw so many fires all around Jerusalem last week. This week we didn't have some. Thank you, Lord. But it was frightening.
And have you got some things for us today? You're all ready?
Yes, but I think it's very much linked also with what you have. Like we had a very interesting conversation this morning, and I find the place, that we were speaking is written, and I remember reading it like a few years ago, but it's so important. It's written is in Jeremiah, and what is written in the last days. In the Achachit Ayamim is written in Hebrew, you will understand, okay? You will understand it. Or maybe, okay, this is in Jeremiah 31:24. But there is another passage also in Jeremiah 23:20, and it's written almost the same thing, but it's written in the Achachit Ayamim, you will understand it clearly. And there, when it's written understand, you can translate again in different way. You can perceive it, you can consider it, you can understand. It comes from the name Bina. And the name Bina is like understanding, but I was looking at some other name to try to give more an understanding. Is also insight, is wisdom, is comprehension. And he said that Bina is something that God has given a bit more to the lady, and it's like this insight, this instinct that sometimes the ladies know, and it's like you can put the dot, when you can have a lot of information and don't understand anything, but after having the information, you need to have the understanding to know what's happening, okay? So this is very important. And I see that with all that's happening right now, God is giving us more and more understanding of what's happening behind, okay? We are learning a lot of things. And I think you have things about it, about sin and evil. Are you going to speak about it today?
Yeah. I just wanted to say that if you're interested in following the news in Israel, following what's happening behind the scenes, then please do contact us. We can share with you a bit about what's happening in the background. We have a news source, a news story on our website. If you go to the media button, and you'll see that it says Daily News from Israel underneath, and we're doing a news story. Hopefully on a daily basis, we give you some news from Israel. And as I say, if you want to know a bit more about what's happening behind the scenes, then please do email us. And please do let us know what's happening where you're living as well. Now, we've been talking for the last few weeks from the Book of Enoch. Remember that we said that Jesus said that as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. So we know the big sign of course, is Israel returning to the land, the Jewish people coming back, the tribes coming back to the land of Israel is the sign, isn't it, of the last days, and as it was in the days of Noah. So we were saying that if you study Genesis, you won't see so much about the days, how it was. We know that there were violence and lawlessness, but we don't really know much more. So the Book of Enoch, which isn't biblical in the sense of being part of the Bible, it's an important reference book and has been in some Bibles.
I know, and its reference, you hear it about in Titus, isn't it? And in Timothy, I can't remember. But it's written also in the New Testament, and it's like there is books, historic book, because obviously the Bible has to be can't be like so big, but there is a lot of understanding in other books, and this is so important right now.
So I'm going to be looking at now I want to just say something about the Book of Enoch, because we've been talking about it for a few weeks, but it's very important to point out that it's a difficult book to read because there's a lot of symbolism in it. There's a lot of things that we don't understand. So if you've started reading it and you are having some difficulties, don't worry, this is normal. It's a bit like the Book of Revelation. It has difficult things to understand. Now, if you remember, we were talking about last week about Mount Hermon, the summit, and I'm reading from chapter 6 of the Book of Enoch, number 6. By mutual imprecations upon it, they were all in all 200 who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon, and they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations. This is the fallen angels that Mount Hermon. This is in chapter 6. And then in chapter 7, it says, and all the others together with them took unto themselves wives. So they've done something which is wrong, which is the angels were not meant to take human wives. They took human wives, and each chose for himself one, and they began to go into them and defile themselves with them, and they taught them charms and enchantments, and they became pregnant, and they bore great giants. These are the wives, whose height was over 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. This is the giants. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against the birds, the beasts, and the reptiles, and fish. They began to alter the genes. We've been talking about this as well. This is one of the sins that they were, or the evil that they were carrying out, not to mix them up again. But it was evil what they were doing. They were mixing up the DNA in the animals. And they began to devour one's flesh, and drink the blood. And then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. And we were pointing out that the time, as in the days of Noah, so they were changing the DNA in man, they were changing the DNA in animals, and they were making
in plants
and we're seeing that today. There's you only need to do a bit of research on the internet to see how much experimentation with DNA is happening, and this is exactly what was happening then. Now, coming back to this issue of sin and evil, they are two different things, and I think for a long time we haven't understood that. It hasn't been taught. I've never heard anyone teaching that they are different, and most people would say, well, sin comes from the time Adam fell, and evil as well, but it doesn't say that. It says that sin came then. But it's very interesting that a lot of Jewish tradition is that evil came at the time of the days of Noah from the giants, and they produced evil. When they died, the giants, they produced evil spirits. Now that's a very strange thing, but if you think about it, it's quite normal in one way, because they were spiritual beings. They weren't just giants. They were a mixture of the angels and humans. So we don't understand how that could mix together, but they were a mixture of them. and they were fallen angels, so they're a mixture of evil. And so for them to produce evil spirits after themselves is quite normal in one way. But again, this is all things that we're learning from the Book of Enoch, and we'd be very interested to hear what you are learning as well. It's interesting, Natalie, that Mount Hermon is called, we were talking about this last week as well, in the Arabic term Al-Harim, which means sacred enclosure, because of the fall of the fallen angels.
Yeah, which is very, very, very interesting, because when you start to know that, if you remember when God is saying to the Hebrews, because the name Jewish is not really, the name in Hebrew is Bene Israel, the son of Israel, okay? This is better because Israel was Jacob. So it was the son of Israel, which was the 12 tribes, okay? It's better than Jewish. It's not exact, and it makes us thinking a different way. So we really need to start to speak really precisely. Is the son of Israel, which was the son of Jacob. Okay, so Bene Israel. So God is speaking to the Bene Israel to go out of Egypt, and He's doing so many miracles, and they go into the desert, and they are going to receive the Torah. And He said, now the goal is for you to go into the land of Israel. Okay, so the spy goes. We read that not so long ago. The spy goes over there, and they bring evil reports, but like a true reports, okay, when you read what they are saying, but they didn't have the trust that God was going to help them. What was the true report? That there was some very big fruits, and this was because what we were saying of the Nephilim and of the giants who was there, and he said, they are giants over there. And this was from the leftover, I would say, of the Nephilim, of all these evil people that were like the descendants of what was happening during Noah. And as you said, they were like the descent from heaven on Mount Hermon, which is like the north of Israel. And so they love to be in this area because they know that Mount Moriah is the place of the throne of God, that God has chosen. So they want to be not so far, because Lucifer, which is Satan, wants to be controlling the earth and wants to be there. So God was asking the Bene Israel, the son of Israel, to go there to conquer, because he wanted to bring his kingdom on earth. And so it was with them, he was going to conquer them and put evil away of the land of Israel. And so it's because of that, it's making all sense, that God was saying, you have to annihilate them. Like He's saying, like we were speaking about Amalek last time, and I've done a special video, if you want to look on my channel, Nathalie Blackham, on YouTube, just about Amalek, to explain all the things. So God said, you have to fight Amalek generation after generation. Amalek is a part of this evil because it can't be redeemed. And it's because of that that God was saying to the children of Israel, Bene Israel, you have to annihilate them, because there is evil seed there, and you have to take it out if I want my kingdom to be able to grow. So this is because very often we say, oh, he was a bad God, that he wanted to annihilate it. No. The thing is, he's always good, and he loved people. But again, as you were saying, that the evil hates man. Because, and it's written in one of the Psalms, why did you make Enosh, man, like the frail man? Why did you make him almost like you, almost like Elohim? And they are like really jealous of man. And so they are trying to take over. And God said, no, this will be the Bnei Israel. This is the man that I want them to conquer, and I want them to take over the land, and after to be a light to the nations. So this makes all sense, what you are saying and what we are discovering with the Book of Enoch.
Yeah.
And the Book of Enoch is very important. It's written like the first believers knew about it totally. It's written in some of the letters, and they speak about this book. So it was something they knew, they had all this understanding. But us, we just lost all these things. And as Jeremy say, at the end, you will understand, because God is starting to reveal all these things for us to understand that this is a spiritual battle. It's been always a spiritual battle. Now, like the story that we're saying with Moses and Joshua. Moses is fighting the spiritual realms and Joshua is fighting on the earth, and is what God is asking us to do. We are good people, but we have also to make war. Like Abraham make war with the giants, the same again, but we never had this understanding.
No. And, there's a lot of cover-up of what's, the history, the correct biblical history of the world, which would make a lot of sense in the days that we're living. And, it's interesting that, as Natalie was saying from the book of Jeremiah, that we're starting to understand a lot of the pieces of the puzzle. And I know a lot of you are as well. You're seeing what's happening in the world, and you're putting the pieces together. And it is very important to understand that sin and evil are different. Why? Because that's the reason that God had to finish the world in the days of Noah, because of the extent of evil across the world was not able to sustain humans anymore, and not able to sustain humanity in any sense. And he had to hide Noah. And I might have mentioned this before. We think of the giants maybe as the big friendly giants, but they weren't. They were savage, evil beings pillaging the earth and destroying humanity. So this is more the picture that we need to have in our minds. Now, the other interesting thing is that there have been a lot of technological advances, and we were talking about last week a takeover of data by Amazon and Google, and it's something very concerning that suddenly Israeli data is taken over. But there are some good advances happening in Israel, which we're very pleased to bring to you. And one of them is in Petah Tikva, which is in the center of Israel. They've launched a light railway. We've got a light railway system in Jerusalem, and they've launched a light railway in Petah Tikva, and it had its first public test drive on Thursday. The central city of Petah Tikva is part of a greater public transport project being developed in Gush Dan metropolitan area, which is set to become fully operational in 2022 and includes stops in Bnei Brak, Tel Aviv, Jaffa and Bat Yam. This particular light railway had its first full test drive outside the city's maintenance centre 10 days ago. However, on Thursday, the officials staged a public test run for the benefit of the media and the general public. And just to kind of report, we were privileged as journalists to be on the first test run of the Jerusalem light railway, which has transformed the city centre. You may not be aware of this. Some of you may have had the privilege of riding on it, but basically it means that you can get from one part of the city to the other without having to wait for a bus. And it takes you can go from the old city straight into Jerusalem. From Jaffa Gate.
You can go to Herzl,
right,
which is where Yad Vashem is, to all the other way to French Hill. So it's quite amazing. And they are going to build some new lines. I think there is one that they are going to do next to the hospital.
This is in Jerusalem.
Yeah, the hospital.
Hadassah Hospital.
Hadassah Hospital, yeah.
Yeah, so the light railway has transformed the landscape of Jerusalem, has transformed Israel, because it's
Jaffa Street is so much nicer now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have trees, you have the light railway, and you don't have all the smell of the fume of the buses. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of really,
Closures, street closures.
yes, and dust and noises. And I know for the shops who were around, it wasn't nice because people couldn't shop as much as before, so they lost some profit. But now it's done, and it's amazing. And not only that, there is also now some new road, and there is, I know that our daughter is bringing her kids to school in Jerusalem, and now there is, our grandson was saying, we go in a tunnel. It's not really, I mean, it's like a road goes under a road, and so no more traffic jam, and it's much quicker. And so it's quite exciting to see all these things that happen.
And there's even more road construction going on. They're building a tunnel from where the other hospital is,
Shuarit HaDin.
from the centre part of Jerusalem into through the mountain, and it's coming out on our side, on the west side. So that's going to relieve a lot of traffic.
Yes.
So there's a lot of
and there is
advancements.
another one, you're right, and there is another one in the south of Jerusalem who is going to Efrat and Gush Etzion, and they have a tunnel already, but it's only 2 lanes, and it's packed every day. You have a lane, you have traffic jam every day. And so they will have double of this tunnel. So again, it will help a lot because there is more people living in Judea, which is the south of Jerusalem. And so it's really going to help them to be able to come into Jerusalem much easier.
Now, one of the things that's been happening in Israel is that there's been a fight back against the money that's been used for terrorism. One of the things you might not be aware of is that Israel is taking court action against terrorists, against terrorist countries, against those who are financing terrorism. We were privileged to hear at one of the General Press Office conferences the lady who is organising all of this. And the news is that Israeli victims of the Gaza rockets, you may remember we had the Gaza war, the operation that the Israeli army was taking to stop the terrorism was going on. And the rockets were being fired and damaging houses and killing people in Israel. And the victims of this recent terrorism, the victims of the Gaza war, are filing a lawsuit against Qatari banks, charities, at the Jerusalem District Court on Thursday. The Shuarit HaDin Law Centre initiated the legal action last week on behalf of 24 Israeli families of terror victims, a total of 120 individual plaintiffs, not just of the Gaza war, but who've been affected by Hamas terrorism. The Tel Aviv-based Shuarit HaDin Law Centre filed the action at the district court for the transfer of funds to Hamas's military wing during last month's war against the jihadi organisation in the Gaza Strip. They organised the action on behalf of the Israeli families of terror victims, and according to a statement, the action is for 1 billion shekels, not sure what that is in dollars, but it's 1 billion shekels, was filed against charities and Qatari banks. Now, we were talking about if you want to find out who's the roots at the bottom of terrorism, you have to follow the money. And so we will be keeping a sharp eye on that, won't we, Natalie? Well, it's been great to be with you today. Thank you so much for joining us. We love to hear from you, by the way. If you'd like to email us, please email us at info@israelfirst.org. You can also leave a message on our contact form on the website. Visit the website, which is www.israelfirst.org. And remember, we're the program that looks at the land, the people, and the language.